Beginning today, Canadians will start to lose access to news on Facebook and Instagram. In a statement, Meta said news links and content posted by news publishers and broadcasters in Canada will no longer be viewable by people in Canada. Meta has been threatening to pull news content since the government passed Bill C-18, which requires tech companies to pay news organizations for links and posts to their content. In a statement, the newly appointed Heritage Minister, Pascal Saint-Onge, says the government is standing up to Facebook for the right reasons. Writing, "This is irresponsible. They would rather block their users from accessing good quality and local news instead of paying their fair share to news organizations." So let's bring in the Power panel. Shakir Chambers is a principal with Earnscliffe Strategies. Michelle Cadario, former campaign director and deputy chief of staff to Paul Martin. Shannon Proudfoot is with the Globe and Mail, and Zane Velji is a partner at North Weather. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Shakir, I will start with you. We now know Meta is going ahead with this. There was some speculation that maybe the threats were a bargaining tactic, but clearly that's not the case. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we've had some panels before where there's speculation that Meta was bluffing, but they've clearly made the calculation that news revenue is not really that important to them in Canada, at least, and they can go ahead with blocking news in Canada. I mean, complying with the law doesn't only mean having links and paying for those links. It also means, not having them at all and just moving forward with your business as is. If you look at some of the statements on their website, they make the case that, they think Canadians actually want less political content, less news on their website. Less than 3% of what Canadians see in their feed is actually Canadian news anyway. So why does this matter? I think at the end of the day, at least in this context, Meta's a small fry. I think Google is actually the bigger player here in terms of Canadians being able to search news, in terms of the material impact that this legislation will have on their bottom line. So we'll see if the minister can help them adjust and comply through regulations. But for Meta, this legislation is just not even workable, right? For them to actually move forward and actually have news here, they want the government to actually remove that legislation, and the new minister has given no sign that she's going to be open to that.
Shannon, on that note, this is a new minister. We are coming on the heels of a cabinet shuffle last week, and Pascal Saint-Onge inherits Bill C-18. How ready do you think she is to handle the file and the potential fallout from today?
I mean, clearly the new minister and the government are trying to send the message that they're standing firm. It's a pretty bullish statement. Personally, though, just to pick up on something that was mentioned earlier, I still think it's possible this is a negotiation tactic. Given the fact that they've gone ahead with it, to me, doesn't mean it's not still saber rattling and trying to turn up the temperature in an effort to sort of force the government's hand. I think it's sort of a really tough file to get your head around in a sort of balanced way, because there's so much kind of branding skin in the game, I would say, on both sides. For the Liberal government, they very clearly want to be seen as champions of democracy, champions of a free press. You can see that in the way Pascal Saint-Onge and other statements made about this sort of wave that flag. It's very kind of gauzy and idealistic. And so clearly it is important to them to be seen as the guardians of a free press. And then on the part of the tech giants, there's all kinds of spin about what this would really mean, why it's a problem for them. I've always sort of wondered, if news is worth less than nothing to you guys, like why do you care? Like, assuming that this is a negotiation tactic rather than seriously them like packing up their ball and going home instead of playing. But unfortunately, the net result, particularly from the Liberal government, who presumably went in with some kind of honorable intentions here, however the execution was sort of mangled, is now it's a net loss, big time, at least at the moment, for news, and particularly for solid, reliable mainstream news. You could now have the net effect be that what people will see in their social media stream is all kinds of junk, misinformation, disinformation, spin, without even the diluted effect of having sort of mainstream verifiable news in there. So it's a really unfortunate outcome as things sit right now.
Yeah, well, to that point, there is also a debate to be had about just how much of a role the government should play when it comes to ensuring or protecting the freedom of the press in Canada. You can see a little bit of that playing out in Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre's attacks on the bills today. Michelle, I'll turn to you. Given all this, what should the Liberals' next step be?
Well, I think that they might have lost sight of what their objective was in the end. And,
Yeah.
I really agree with what they're trying to do in terms of ensuring that we have a strong, free press to underpin democracy. All good intentions. But did this policy maneuver actually work to meet that objective? I'm unclear. I'm not sure Canadians are going to rally around this idea that there's a toll essentially on, Facebook, Instagram, and potentially Google. And I think Shakir's right. That's where it will probably hit most. And I'm also not, I'm unconvinced that this is in any way good for the media. If no longer are things being shared, is it actually getting that same kind of traction? And will they lose hits on their own websites of people following through and trying to get to an article or going through a paywall? Like, I think I'm actually quite surprised how strident the new minister is today, that there wouldn't have been a little bit of, not backing down, but a little bit of room for to open discussion, to perhaps be more flexible in terms of whatever regulations they're putting forward. I just don't think Meta cares one way or the other what the Canadian government ends up doing on this. It's no skin off them. And, I think that we've got to keep ourselves in perspective. We're a small fry in this whole thing. And I'm not sure other countries are going to be following along in our heels.
Well, it's certainly a little bit interesting to think that Canada would be considered a small fry in a dispute like this. But Zane, I want to follow up on something Michelle said. There are advocates, academics, and others who say that this is a bad law, whether or not tech giants comply with it. I want to put that to you. What do you think happens next?
Well, let me pick up on the bad law argument, right? Because I agree with my fellow panelists, which is at some point for the Liberals, this became not just C-18, but C everything. It was the democracy bill. It was the save the business model of the newsroom bill. It was the jobs bill. Oh, and it was also our proxy to fight antitrust against these big tech companies. And so now you have multiple streams that the government has effectively laid out to say this is what the reason is. This is why we're spending this disproportionate political capital on this file. And to the earlier comment, maybe they've actually lost sight of the core goal. They've got 5 lanes rather than 1. And I think it's been really confusing to the general public. They haven't been able to get a lot of folks who even might be, in the United States, you see anti-big tech as being a bipartisan issue, one of the rare ones. You have that opportunity here, but people really don't have anything to hold on to because it's not one of those bills that you're like, it's about this. And I think for the government, that has been a fundamental problem, spending so much political capital on something that's kind of like silly putty in your hand that you can't really hold on to, you can't really understand. I'll highlight the aspect of us being a small player. There's 2 pieces of strategy that I find interesting here. Number one is Justin Trudeau's positioning of these big tech giants as a David and Goliath fight, that Canada's just a small player in it versus them on a head-to-head basis, trying to position us as the underdogs, trying to will some of that underdog energy. And then there's the reality of the situation, which is we're actually a small fry. And that second piece of strategy I want to highlight is in the minister's statement today, where she mentions that other countries that are considering a similar law, like Australia, she also just casually inserts the United Kingdom and the United States, almost trying to will an allyship into existence that isn't there. And I think that's really interesting to know, where Canada may be finding itself on a bit of an island, maybe not a remote island, because we've got a few players, but on a bit of an island to Meta's liking in that sense, saying, yeah, we can deal with this. We'll take any PR blowback. We've dealt with significantly worse PR blowback.
Okay.